Over to you, Anastasha.
Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and share.
We can see it.
All right, wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
hello, everybody. Thank you for showing up, and thank you to the Citizens Climate Lobby for having me. Tonight, we're going to talk about a really important, really critical topic on ecological grief, and we're going to explore it through sacred botany as a form of a type of sacred grief expression. All right, and let me give a little bit of background about myself. I am Anastasha Verde. I'm a plant ecologist and have been working in this field for a while. My research focuses on climate change impacts on plant communities and ecosystems, and also ecosystem restoration. I do community service, focusing on ecosystem management, environmental outreach, and I also teach botany, ecology, and conservation courses. I've been a long-time pagan animist for decades, and my public work in this area now focuses on ecological grief, bioregional animism, and then the development of a modern botanical praxis that uses updated contemporary plant ecology, animism, and for a modern era. And actually, I do have a book coming out at the end of the year and early next year called Modern Greenosis with scarlet imprint on this practice. But let's get to the all-important ecological grief. Now, this is interesting because when I bring up ecological grief, sometimes people have a very strong reaction to it. Not necessarily that they feel the intense grief when you say ecological grief, but sometimes there's an anger behind it, like, no, I don't have that. But the intensity of the emotions kind of belies really their real feelings that they have about this. And we all know that ecological grief are these responses that we're having to those of us who are experiencing ecological loss or who are anticipating these types of losses. And what's really interesting is, as I've been doing these types of talks, is sometimes there are generational differences. And it makes sense when we think about those of us who've been around for a little while have really experienced viscerally the change in the ecosystems over time. And so all of this loss that's happening versus maybe some people who are younger, quite younger, and this is like a normal, although of course horrible experience, but there's not so much loss. And so how it's been expressed to me is more of anxiety. I'm anxious about the future that's happening versus all of the loss, but certainly loss is there as well. Now, certainly I'm experiencing profound ecological grief because of the nature of my professional work, but also like my community, like you all, I'm also an animist pagan, and so can feel that intensely. And I was interested in how the rest of my community were experiencing and processing the ecological grief that they were perhaps feeling. And so, of course, being a scientist, I thought, okay, well, maybe I should conduct a survey, right? Maybe I should do a little bit of a pilot study. And so I focused this work on the umbrella term, right? We all know this is a big umbrella term for modern Western pagan. There are lots of different paths that fall under this umbrella term. But for the most part, we see that individuals who hold the earth as sacred, oftentimes they practice a form of pantheism where the divine is part of the earth, right? The earth is sacred. Other species are sacred. There are other than human persons, which is really is animism, right? There's a lot of animism in there, although there are shades of animism. Now, why plants? Well, of course, as a plant ecologist, that's important. It's important to me to think about how we're incorporating, or in some cases, using plants in ritual. And we all know if we have a praxis that we see plants popping up in rituals frequently, right? We often see them either included as symbols, for example, the symbol of nature herself. Or that the plants are bringing some type of spiritual property to the ritual, or in a more deeply animistic sense, that they are spiritual beings fully participating in the ritual. And so, keeping that in mind with this question, how are our community expressing grief? Because our grief is sacred pain. Are we starting to see it? And what does that look like? And so I conducted surveys, interviews, and discussions. I did all the things, read the books, blog posts, etc., searching for signatures of ecological grief and expressing that in our community. And so what I'm going to share now are some examples of some of these rituals, and we'll find some common themes, and we'll regroup at the end of some of these examples and look at some common themes of ecological grief expressions in ritual with, of course, our plant partners. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Council of All Beings. Anybody? Maybe you say. Okay, thank you. All right, so some people are familiar with this. It's a fairly complex ritual. It's very deeply animistic, and if you haven't participated in one, this is definitely a good ritual for processing ecological grief. It's been around in the larger community for a while, and it comes to us actually from deep ecology, which is kind of pantheistic, but not everybody who practices deep ecology are pagans. But as you can see, a lot of different types of pagans have participated in Council of All Beings. So this type of experience is embodied. And what we mean by that is that individuals will take on the mantle, will embody an individual species, for example, say red oak, or perhaps a red-shouldered hawk, a red-tailed hawk, or a group of organisms, plants, or even ecosystems, beach, etc. And they will embody those particular organisms, those persons in ritual. Now, the cycle of the ritual can last sometimes for a couple of days to only a couple of hours. And there are different phases or different stages. There's the morning part, so the recognition where everybody in attendance can express their grief that they're having. And then importantly, it follows up with remembering our connections to other species, to the environment, so that people can reconnect if they're not so connected. Then there's the embodiment component, where individuals then step forward as the embodied species. So for example, red oak, to speak on their behalf and share what they're feeling. For example, that might be rage or pain or confusion about what's happening. Participants then will reflect on the ritual and the experience that people have during the ritual, and of course, the knowledge that was shared by the other species through the embodiment. And what we're going to be seeing over and over again in these rituals is that the rituals are always paired with application, and there's a lot of the hope. If you're doing application, that means there's hope, right? That you can go out and you can do something to help change the circumstances, the cause of the grief in the first place. So that's the Council of All Beings. Next up, some of you might be familiar with reclaiming witchcraft, so it should come as no surprise that there would be a ritual to help people process ecological grief. And this particular ritual is called the Altars of Extinction. And in the ritual, there are memorials and shrines to species who are going extinct, who are gone extinct, and who are going extinct. And if you participate in rituals, you know that sometimes there's the individual that is in the middle, right? They're neither gone, right, nor are they fully present. And so in this case, for this particular ritual, that was Raven's manzanita, who was acting in that particular ritual role in that liminal space between the worlds. And so this ritual, of course, is there to help people honor the species who are passing, of course, but also as a way to collectively, as a community, express their grief together and to contemplate on the magnitude of what's happening. Now, of course, importantly, we see the hope of inspiring people to go out and do something to help cause change in the world, whether that's their own behavior or not. Next, one of our other examples we see comes to us from Druidry. And I know you guys have had Dr. O'Driscoll on, right, as giving a talk. And so this ritual she conducted because she was seeing what was happening to the hemlock trees. And if you're not familiar with that, invasive species, the woolly adelgid, is definitely impacting hemlock trees, and over time can directly cause their death or indirectly cause their death through secondary infections. And you can see in this forest where you see the pattern of forest death. And so based on what she was seeing, she decided, well, I'm going to go to the hemlock trees themselves and ask them, because certainly the trees have agency, right? They're other than human persons and have agency and can make a decision here. So she went to them and asked, what can we do to help you through this, to help you cope with this loss, this disease? And from that experience, she determined that the trees were asking for energy to do with as they saw fit. And so she designed this ritual in the company with humans, and also other plant species. And we see here apple, blackberry, birch, and oak, and you can see them represented in the cards and ogum. And they're ritual participants, so they're bringing their particular strengths to the ritual. And so what you're seeing here is an interspecies ritual, right? It's not just humans, it's other species collectively working together, and energy was raised and then sent to the hemlock trees for the hemlocks to use.
What? Sure.
Okay. Another example, and this one would be, you can think of this as a solitary ritual, but I don't really see it as solitary because it's another example of ecological grief expression combined with, going out to do some work, some renewal. And the reason why, even though it's solitary on the human side, there are other species present, right? So it's a community, it's an interspecies community ritual. And in this case, the individual described going into the forest when they were overwhelmed with ecological grief and communing with the species that were there. So sitting down, going into a communion like a trance, joining the larger network of trees, connected through the mycorrhizal network, pouring libations or offerings to the land spirits. And then from that sharing of their grief, finding renewal to go out and to do work. So again, we see those ties of, okay, well, here is my grief. I'm expressing it. It's the sacred grief, but also I'm now feel more empowered to go do work. Our last example, and then we'll look at some of these common elements, comes to us from Dr. Rune Rasmussen, who's from Denmark, and working to basically resurrect Nordic animism as a way for people to feel empowered to go out and do environmental work through Nordic animism. And he designed this ritual called the On-Year Ritual, and it was conducted by many different people internationally last year. And he connected this ritual of reconciliation, of recognition of humans' role in the worldwide ecocide. And he connected it to the mythological, the story of a king who consumes his children so that he can live a longer life, right? And so you can clearly see some of those connections that are made through this mythology of the king who's consuming too much, right? Not leaving his descendants anything, really not having any descendants at all. And so he uses this story and relates it to what's happening in the world today. So the On ritual becomes a vehicle for expressing ecological grief and pain, but also the recognition of our role in what's happening and reconciliation. And so there are different rituals. This one was conducted at the Cascadian Midsummer Festival. And you can see there's a procession in the background, and that ultimately resulted in the planting of a tree. And trees, they receive a lot of focus here. And there's this oath or commitment to do better, to go out into the world and to do better. Okay. So if we look at these different expressions of ecological grief, there are definitely some common elements, but something I do want to touch on before we get to and dive into these common elements and talk about how we can use those to help us process ecological grief. And one is that it was actually kind of a struggle to find a lot of rituals out there. And I think there's a number of reasons why that is the case. One, of course, can be simply climate denial. I don't really think that's too much of a problem in our community, but it's more of like the type of denial that happens when you're overwhelmed by the magnitude of what's happening in the world. Certainly people are reporting feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of this situation, climate change, sixth mass extinction event, and feeling overwhelmed by guilt and shame and not knowing what to do. But there's also some elements of spiritual and ecological bypassing that's happening. So for example, spiritual bypassing would be like, well, the universe will take care of this. The universe will sort this out. Ecological bypassing would be, well, not all species are going to go extinct. The earth will still survive. So what can I do, right? So that would be an example of ecological bypassing. So certainly I think those are reasons, but I think it's also important to note that for a lot of people, they're just now starting to really feel the effects of climate change, right? Certainly 10 years ago, for some people 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you were just starting to see that, and people were still debating if climate change was even a thing. So I think it's absolutely new, and we'll start to see more ecological grief rituals. And that, our communities don't have this deep history to draw on, and certainly really nobody does, for this magnitude of what's happening right now on our planet with humans involved. So that is a novel situation. But if we had like a continuing practice that had gone on or survived, we might have stories that we could lean on, right? Or rituals to help people process, but we don't have that. So we need to create these rituals to help each other, right? To help our community cope and process with a lot of times profound ecological grief that's being felt. So we do what we do best, right? One of the things we do are do rituals. And from these ecological rituals, we can see some common elements that we're finding. One is that the rituals are happening in community, but that doesn't necessarily mean only humans, right? A single individual human can go into a field or a forest or a desert community and experience community there, right? Surrounded by their other than human kin, their other than human siblings, and experience community. So community element is important. The part of the ritual where you recognize and own, right, our role in what's happening is important. That's kind of like what we would call partly shadow work, right, where we see what's happening. And an important element for these ecological grief rituals are, of course, to express the outlet, to grieve together, and express what you're feeling, and then honoring it for what it is, and of course, honoring other species and the earth for what they are experiencing. And importantly, and psychology would back this up, and so does the research, is that we should pair this type of ritual somehow with an action. And sometimes that's like commitments that people make. I commit to do this in my life to help improve the situation, to fight. I have hope. I continue to cling to hope and do actions in the world that can help us fight climate change and slow it down. And so that's some of these common elements that we're seeing in the ecological grief rituals. Now, for people who are experiencing sometimes overwhelming grief and anxiety, there are some other things that they can do to help alleviate those feelings and cope with them. We already talked about these two, but of course, getting outside is helpful. It's something I do quite a bit every day. We are starting to see some support groups out there that you can find or you can form to help support your community members. Eco chaplains, it's sort of a new thing. It's started in Buddhism as a way to help their participants in the eco chaplaincy, I think that's a word, express and cope with ecological grief and anxiety. And now that it has been recognized by therapists, there are therapists who are now seeing, of course, more and more patients expressing ecological grief, and they're helping them process. So you can seek out therapists who are familiar with these particular issues. And I believe that is our 20 minutes. And I just wanted to thank all of the participants, really, and the people sharing those rituals in the world, allowing us to learn and to express our grief. And we hope that this will continue. I'm certainly, that's a project, is to put together a collection of rituals from different areas to help our community. And that's it. And I'm certainly, let's continue this conversation. You got anybody?
Well, thank you so much. I think that this is just a lovely thing. I'm going to, can we stop sharing the presentation? And if people want to ask questions or just, throw out ideas or something, we have about 10 more minutes. So if you'd like to do that, you can either raise your physical hand or you can use the Zoom hand feature. I like to try to make this as easy as possible. It's a little bit easier if you use because I don't want to miss anybody and I can only see so many of you. Oh, I see a lot of hands already. I'm going to start with Beverly and then I'll get to you, Maka. Beverly, why don't you go first? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, well, I don't know if I know anybody here. This is the first time I've been to a CCL event in a while, but can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you.
So,
Yeah.
I guess maybe I loved it all, because it was resonating with me. I would just say that without even knowing it, I am probably doing my own rituals, right? And I think a lot of people are, without even maybe not even realizing what they're doing. So I don't know if there's a way that, and there's probably a lot of stuff out there, but examples of I love the fact that you can go out by yourself in community and you can grieve. And then I think it was one of the last rituals that had an action attached to it. So I think that's really important at this stage in the game. So I don't know if anyone has listed maybe, I take actions, but I don't know if those actions are, ritualistic or,
Well,
what
just to throw an idea very quickly, we had another person that talked about making seed bombs. So one thing you could do very easily is make a seed bomb, do a ritual, and then you can plant the seed. So just to throw that out. And I want to give everybody a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead and pop it over to Maka. Thank you so much, by the way, for sharing. We really appreciate it. Maka?
I will be succinct. First of all, I thought it was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I got a lot of great ideas from it. And I wanted to just point out one small little error that you get to change on your PowerPoint, which was beautiful. And his name is Graham Harvey, not Harvey Graham.
Ah, thank you.
An easy mistake, but he's a lovely man and his name is Graham.
Thank you so much, Mark.
That's all.
Maka, my editor-in-chief. Joe, I think, did you have something?
Oh, just a couple thoughts. The implements and actions around, thank you, around tree planting particularly are integral to Fairfaria. And I happened to recently discover, I'm going to try to show you a tool. This is a decorative tool, right? Because it's got a ribbon on it, so it's decorative, so it's a stang. And what this is used for, it's a tool with tree planting of fruit trees, specifically they get very heavy and the branches need to be propped up. So it's a ritual element, but also, we have a couple of these, right? And, they're brought out as part of the regalia. But I think that it's a really good idea to ritualize all these different aspects of tree planting and especially fruit tree planting because and nuts, because they're so generous. The trees promote like an organic lifestyle that is also beautiful and not harmful. Just saying.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And the fact that you've been doing this for so many years, I think is just lovely, really. As far as sources, by the way, it would be surprised. Some groups were already mentioned. So in addition to those groups, you might want to check with Earth Spirit
Hmm.
and Circle Sanctuary. These are
Yes.
people, both, I would be surprised if they didn't, if Selena Fox doesn't have something like this, I will, really, I will be just shocked. And Andres, I'm sure, has something, even if he hasn't, because their
I
group,
don't think they
these are
do.
people I know are doing a lot of stuff. Also, the ADF people might have some stuff because they're and OBOD. So I can give you a list. I'm just giving you some names that you could go back and, if you need contacts, reach out to us. Maka's very connected. We can find you people. Alex.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. I guess, Anastasia, in your research, what were the common threads that showed up over and over again in rituals across different groups?
Okay, so one, of course, is community. So is community, whether that's interspecies or not, but kind of hard not to have other species there in a community. But community recognition, the grief aspect and honoring that, and then always tied to hope and action. Yeah. So they're always there. And of course, we know that that is important to go out and do. And so that all of that was tied together. So that comes up very common in these rituals. Yeah.
Yeah, without the action, I mean, that's such an important thing. One of the ways we deal with grief, just in general, is by doing things.
Yeah.
So that's super glad to see that people are doing that.
Yeah, me too.
Oh. So we've got about 3 more minutes. So one thing that one of the things that I love about, like you said, I love the ritualistic thing, and I love the interspecies because, like I said, we're always, almost every pagan, even the atheopagans, they don't have to have, you can just think of it as these are other life forms, and these are people that you are establishing a connection with. And I love the fact that we're bringing both science, good science, so that maybe some of our rituals are less harmful. Like some of our pagan ancestors, they didn't realize that they used to tie things on trees, which isn't the best thing for the tree. And I don't think we have to be, I think we can honor that and move past that. And maybe instead of doing that, maybe we can do something for the tree that would actually help it. That's just my thoughts. Joe.
Oh, that just gets exactly into what I was going to bring up, which is libations, right? Which
Libations, I do that well.
you can water the tree, yeah, but there's other things like fertilizer, which can be liquid, or even just milk, which interestingly enough is a fairly good fertilizer, although obviously it's an animal product and very expensive, but it has a quality of being precious and so nourishing that when we have in fact poured it over natural features, it has felt very powerful. So maybe other people have thoughts about libations. I would love to hear further thoughts.
Anybody else do libations out there when they're going out and that you have thoughts on? I mean, I know that when I go out in my local forest, one of the things I always do is I always bring with me a little bit of water that I pour on the trees. Just as kind of a thanking them for, I always feel like I'm going into your territory. Thank you for being, for allowing me in. Even though it's a public park, it's still their territory in my mind. Go ahead, Maka.
I don't know if this is exactly a libation, but I think it sort of is. When I was a little girl, my mother used to tell me that I should take the hair from my hairbrush or whatever, throw it out the window because it helps the birds can make nests of it. So it's not, I guess to me, it's like a connection with nature. You're braiding yourself in or, tying yourself into nature in a way by offering your hair to whatever creature picks it up and uses it.
Well, this I think is
corny, but but I still do it.
No, I don't think it's corny. I think it's awesome.
Hotels, car rental. Welcome back. I'm Alemi from
Hey. So we only have 1 minute. I just want to let people know that next time when we have a meeting, I will be away. But don't worry, Bart, who started this meeting, is going to be stepping in, so there will still be a meeting. We meet, I just want to remind everybody very quickly that we do this every month. It's a half an hour time, and I want to thank everybody for what you're doing for the sacred earth. Thank you for joining us, and whatever you do, stay safe and blessed be.
Thank you, everybody.
Andrea, this is recorded, right?
Yes, well, I will be posting it on YouTube.
Okay, I just want to post, I was gonna suggest posting it on the cog list.
Okay, sure, I'll put a link, I'll
I'd
put a
like to
link on there
circulate,
too.
I'll circulate it once it's,
Okay, you can do it then.
okay.
All
I mean,
right.
no,
Good
you
night,
can do that. I
everyone.
mean, elsewhere.
Got it. I'll put it on
But you
Cognition
have the
just
link.
right
I'm
away.
going to circulate it in some of my interfaith communities. Okay.
I will absolutely do that. You got
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.